For your ears only for the week of April 22nd, Earth Day 2012, and this show's 30th anniversary on air, I'm David Alpern.
I'm Catherine Herzog.
The last thing we can afford to do is to go back to the very same policies that got us into this mess in the first place. That's part of what this election's all about.
He's going to be focusing on different Americans and trying to scapegoat other people for his own failures. You will see him attack success day in and day out. And one thing you know is if you attack success, you're going to have less of it.
Economic policy and the actual economic conditions Americans perceive clearly constitute the major battleground of the 2012 presidential campaign as former Massachusetts moderate Governor Mitt Romney solidifies Republican support for his contest with Barack Obama and a Democratic base not nearly as firm for him as 4 years ago. Big industrial donations are falling way off. But issues of special concern to the increasingly influential ranks of women and Latino voters and others most pained by a feeling of unfairness in the American system also remain key factors.
To look at the new state of the race, including increasing speculation about the vice presidential nomination in both parties, for your ears only, we're joined again by Princeton University Professor of History and Public Affairs, Julian Zelizer. His books include Arsenal of Democracy, Jimmy Carter, a biography, and now Governing America, the revival of political history from Princeton University Press. Welcome back to our program.
Thanks for having me.
You recently wrote that the resolution of the presidential race into a Romney-Obama contest tells us something unexpected about contemporary politics after all the complaints about crippling polarization.
Well, we always hear about red and blue America. We hear about a polarized political system where both parties can't get along and have fundamental disagreements, yet both candidates this time around are going to be pragmatic problem solvers. Mitt Romney, famous for moving around on positions, for switching and not being loyal to certain party orthodoxies, and Barack Obama has been the same, constantly frustrating the left wing of his party. So the choice for both parties is not this stark red and blue America, but instead something in the middle.
To what extent do you think Romney should be moving away from a conservative social positions he aligned with during the campaign, some of which have been construed as a war on women? And can he, given constant pressures for purity from the Republican right, both around the country and in Congress, where some GOP leaders are saying they really set the agenda now?
He will have to move away from the base. This is going to be a game, meaning the election, about winning these swing states, winning moderate voters and disaffected Democrats. And Romney is going to have to stand firm and not move too far to the right on these kinds of questions, or he will play into the central attack Barack Obama looks like he is about to make, that Romney is in fact secretly an extremist, secretly part of the right wing of the party. So Romney will have to defy that and do what every other Republican president has done since Reagan, and that's run to the center, not run on the right.
Obama and Romney traded narrow leads in national polling last week. But could Obama's large edge among women and Latinos be decisive in maximizing their actual turnout?
It's complicated. I mean, on the one hand, the economy is clearly coming up in the polls as a huge vulnerability for President Obama and an opening for Mitt Romney to do well. This gender gap we've heard a lot about is a big problem for Republicans, and it's not a problem that's easily fixed. It's rooted in the policies of the GOP, and it's rooted in the basic composition of a lot of the organizations behind the party. The Latino vote's the most complicated. You know, there's other polls suggesting the economic downturn has really kind of made Latinos a population that's in flux. So all these polls, I think, show this and that, but this is an electorate in flux, and both candidates know that.
The Secret Service prostitution scandal in Colombia clearly overshadowed Obama's role there in the Summit of the Americas, where he clung to a U.S. drug war policy, even while admitting it was debatable. So maybe it was something of a blessing. But as the scandal expands, do you see it having a political impact on the race, further undermining faith in government or at least government police power?
Well, I don't think it will undermine faith in government. What I do think it does is it takes attention away from other issues. So President Obama wanted to highlight his international economic policies and his international relations credentials, all these issues. That was why he went. But instead we hear about Secret Service and agents with prostitutes. And so I think it's one of these issues that is very attractive for reporters to write about and talk about. It's very attractive for people to read about. And so the the danger for Obama and Romney, frankly, is this, really takes attention away from the kind of questions each candidate wants to focus on.
Relatively modest bail was set last week for George Zimmerman, the Florida Citizens Watch volunteer finally charged with second-degree murder for shooting unarmed black teenager Trayvon Martin. And there's a reasonable chance that Florida's Stand Your Ground law could protect Zimmerman from prosecution. But the Justice Department is also looking into hate crime charges. And I wonder how you think that federal determination could affect presidential politics or vice versa.
Well, it could be important. I mean, President Obama really depended on the African-American vote, which was quite large last time around. This time, there's still African-Americans are very loyal to President Obama and overall pleased with him. But we don't know if it's the same kind of energy as the first time around. Will they all come out to vote? And, issues like this that touch on race relations and continued racism in America do have the potential to stimulate higher turnout. But again, that's not a clear connection with this presidential race, so it's really hard to predict.
On the vice presidential front, you advised Romney to make a boring choice rather than one that solidifies the party's conservative base, as John McCain in part tried to do with Sarah Palin. Talk about that.
Look, the rule of thumb is vice presidential candidates can't really help a ticket, but they sure can hurt a ticket. And I think John McCain went for a game change, as the book was called in the movie, by picking Sarah Palin, trying to energize the base, trying to get media attention and excitement for his candidacy, and it really helped tank what he was doing. I think Mitt Romney needs a boring pick. He needs someone who won't steal the spotlight, who won't cause problems in a campaign that's relatively disciplined, and that won't, by playing to the base, remake what Romney's biggest virtue is. The ability is one of the few Republicans who does have the potential to reach to the center. And the worst for him would be to pick someone who plays to the base, and he looks like an extremist, and in the end loses the kind of votes that might have come his way.
On the Democratic side, there's talk again about replacing Joe Biden with Hillary Clinton, who's been working overtime as Secretary of State, God knows. Last week, she dismissed the idea. Quote, that's like saying if the Olympic Committee called you up and said, are you ready to run the marathon, would you accept? Well, it's not going to happen, Hillary said. What's your view on the wisdom and likelihood of any switch?
Well, you can see the wisdom. I mean, it could be very exciting, and if this gender gap is the kind of problem that we think it is, it could certainly, really bring out a kind of vote for the Democratic Party that would be devastating for the Republicans. It doesn't look like Hillary Clinton wants to do it, and President Obama's team, I'm sure, is worried that by making the switch, they would look not as if they were doing something exciting, but as if they were worried, as if they were concerned about their team. And whenever you have a shakeup historically, that's always a risk. So my guess is they're going to stay steady and really, again, focus not on the vice presidential candidate, but on President Obama himself.
Princeton University Professor of History and Public Affairs, Julian Zelizer. His books include Arsenal of Democracy, Jimmy Carter, a Biography, and now Governing America, the Revival of Political History from Princeton University Press.
Quote from the news, light recovery blowing in a spring wind, dark clouds on the horizon. That was International Monetary Fund Managing Director Christine Lagarde on predictions of a downward economic trend as oil prices rise and stocks decline.
Next, the book on Sandusky and larger lessons of the case for your ears only.